All right, Johnny Mac's in the house. Of course, every day at this time, we talk football. Most of the time. 97.3 ESPN.com, Eagles Insider, GetMoreSports.com, where he covers the NFL. And he joins us now on the Boardwalk on Hotline. John McMullen here on the Sports Bash. Johnny Mac, what's happening, my friend?
How are you guys?
Oh, man, we're doing all right.
A little dazed and confused, if we must be honest, John.
Yes.
I mean, there's just every 5-10 minutes, it seems like something new is coming out and something's changing.
Yeah, well, I will say this about Brian Colangelo, and then hopefully we can talk about some football. He can put this at the top of his resume. One of the few people in the city of Philadelphia that can take the focus off the Philadelphia Eagles. So he's got that in his corner.
Not only that, he has said, well, I said he is probably thanking J.R. Smith today.
Yeah, well, there are a number of people to thank. That's a brilliant finals performance from LeBron James. There's, and you know me, Mike, I'm not one to harp on officiating normally, but that's a game you got to harp on it. That was awfully officiated, especially in key moments. And then, you have one of the biggest blunders in basically NBA history.
Yes, and we'll, of course, continue to discuss that throughout the show as we have been. But, John, you wrote today at 97.3 ESPN.com. Let's talk a little Birds. Are they still doing OTAs this week?
Yeah, this is the second week. Next week will be the last week of OTAs, and then you have the mini camp, which is mandatory for everybody. Hopefully we'll get to see Michael Bennett at that point, and Darren Sproles, although Darren certainly won't be ready to do anything physically, at least more than individual work. And then you got that little soft pocket of the NFL year where every coach kind of holds his breath and hopes nobody gets in trouble, and then you're off to training camp.
We're into June now, and with the calendar turning over, it seems that the Eagles are about to get a little cap relief.
Yeah, from the Mychal Kendricks deal, they designated that as a post-June 1st release, and what that enables them to do essentially is push off the dead money till next year. So it creates a little immediate cap relief for them, and they needed it because they have less than – I've never seen this before. They have less than $100,000 to work with, and tomorrow that will turn into $6.1 million because they'll get $6 million of cap relief for the Mychal Kendricks release, and that will probably enable them. I think they want to bring back Corey Graham. I think that's the most logical move they're going to make, but they're also probably going to bring in a veteran body at defensive tackle, I think, at some point because of the Tim Jernigan back surgery.
Yeah, so they're going to be, that cap relief. Now, do you think that's what was in mind when they did this was, look, we have other holes that we need to start looking to plug here, so we're going to have to make this move, and that those are more important than keeping Mychal Kendricks around?
Yeah, I mean, I've always said the Eagles kind of knew they were going to not have Mychal Kendricks in September by one way or another. They would have preferred to trade him, of course, and get something back in return, but they reached the point of no return as far as having that luxury, and that's what it was. It was an insurance policy that really, really worked out last year perfectly for them when Jordan Hicks got injured. But with Jordan healthy again, or going to be healthy again, and Nigel Bradham here, the reality is he just wasn't projected to play all that much. And as I said, for a team with less than $100,000 to work with before they released him, you can't really afford a $6 million linebacker as your third linebacker is going to play 25, 30% of the time. So it was just really a math equation more than anything else for the Eagles. They know Michael's a good player.
What's Kendricks up to now? I know he's been sniffing around a couple of teams, but it seems like a lot of the teams that he's sniffing around, he might be in a similar role.
Yeah, well, he went to visit the Vikings this week, and obviously his brother Eric is there, and they're very close, so people kind of make that leap. And I'm not putting it out of the question because Anthony Barr is projected to be a free agent next season if the Vikings don't get an extension done. And if they can't, well, maybe you move forward with Eric and Mychal as your 2-3 down linebackers. But that's for the future. If he went out there this year, he'd be in the same situation, arguably even a worse situation, because Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks are arguably even better than Hicks and Bradham. So he was very unhappy with his role here, so I can't see that as a fit unless it's very short term. And then he's also talking about Oakland and Cleveland. I think if he wants to play Oakland with a better team, obviously Oakland would be the better scenario. He's also from California. And if he wants the most money, Cleveland Browns can afford to pay him the most money.
You know, one thing is, if those are the teams that are interested and they look at him in that role, is that what the league looks at him as not a full-time player? Because it seems like Mychal Kendricks seems like the guy. He seems like a guy that was a second-round pick, that he has all this talent, yet nobody is seemingly viewing him as the every down linebacker.
No, I don't think that's true. I think on most teams he would be an every down linebacker. I think there's probably only about 10, maybe even less teams where he wouldn't be an every down linebacker. Philadelphia happens to be one of them, Minnesota, but there's not a lot. He played.
Right, but my point is, then why aren't other teams that need linebacker help looking to upgrade what they? You're telling me he's not better than the starting linebacker on other teams?
No, he is, but you remember the calendar for a player, it's terrible timing because everybody had already put together their plan. Everybody has a full loaded 90-man off-season roster. So if he does want to play the waiting game, that will eventually come to him where he could get a role. The issue he has to ask himself is because everybody except for a few teams who have a lot of money to spend, Cleveland being one of them, have already budgeted for big money players. And maybe the best path forward for him is a one-year deal and then get into free agency again next year when he's in the process early and everybody can budget him into their plans, and then he can get another long-term contract, big money contract. The timing for him, as I said, was bad, but that's just part of the business. So,
John, is it more the timing than the position, too? I mean, because we've talked before about, like, you wouldn't have a Karl Malone-type player today in the NBA. You have positionless basketball. Is the linebacker position becoming devalued?
A little bit. But we always talk about running back on offense, and people rarely talk about it. But, yeah, I mean, the third linebacker spot is essentially, for whatever reason, and I was telling a few people on Twitter this today, people hold on to this theory that the traditional depth charts still exist in the NFL, whether it's a 4-3 defense, whether it's a 3-4 defense, and they don't. The bottom line is a traditional 4-3 defense is a sub-package now. The base defense is the nickel, and that means the slot cornerback is a starter. Here it was Patrick Robinson last year. The third linebacker is a sub-package player. That was Mychal when Jordan was healthy. When he got injured, then that was Joe Walker, Denell Ellerbe. And you saw how much they played. That position, third linebacker, is a sub-package position.
With that in mind, then, I mean, so, like, I think about, like, fullback. Like, there are very few fullbacks in the NFL anymore. Do you see a period of time, then, where there'll be less linebackers in the NFL?
Well, there already are, as I said. But those two linebackers, and you need 2-3 down linebackers. They are extremely important. So I guess the answer is yes and no. At the top of the depth chart, your guys, and here it's Jordan Hicks and Nigel Bradham, those guys are extraordinarily important for the defense. Then the third and the fourth and the fifth linebacker you have, unless injuries come up, they're not very important to the defense. They're more important to the special teams. And in Mychal's case, he belongs in that category as a three-down linebacker. He doesn't belong on that here, but he belongs on it somewhere. And when he's not a great special teams player. So the value is not necessarily there as a third linebacker, especially when you have to pay him as much as the Eagles had to pay him.
Right. And then ripple effect, will that trickle down then to the college game, and you'll see changes on the way the college game is played or position?
Well, college is usually ahead of the NFL, to be honest. I mean, the NFL is usually 3 or 4 years behind college. So college was running all these spread offenses long before the NFL was, and that is the reason you have all these defensive backs on the field. It's because people constantly use 11 personnel, and they always have at least 3 receivers on the field. And the bottom line is the worst receiver in this league is going to beat one of the best linebackers consistently as far as route running. So if you try to play a 4-3 against that offense, you're going to get destroyed. And so Jim Schwartz talks about it all the time. Defense is reactionary by its nature. You have to react to what the offense is doing. And as long as offenses keep putting all those receivers on the field, linebackers aren't going to be as valuable as they once were unless you're that three-down guy that can do everything. You can stop the run, you can rush the passer, and you can cover guys. And there aren't a ton of people like that, even in the NFL.
Talk with John McMullen at JF McMullen on Twitter. A couple guys, Matt Jones, a guy. There's a crowded backfield. Ajayi, Clement, Sproles. You got Wendell Smallwood, Donald Pumphrey. Josh Adams was a guy that was brought in. And Jones, is a guy that kind of, has some pedigree, started in this league. I'm interested to see what kind of potential he has for making the team.
Well, I think there's a clear demarcation line. I think you mentioned those first 3 guys. They're going to make the football team, and that's Jay Ajayi and Corey Clement and Darren Sproles. And then you have the other guys fighting for that 4th, and if they keep 5th spot. And it is going to be a competition. It is going to be Wendell Smallwood, Donnell Pumphrey, and Matt Jones. Josh Adams in that category as well, but he's still dealing with a stress fracture in his foot, so he's already behind schedule. So when you look at those 3, you can make an argument for all of them. Pumphrey is a 4th-round pick last year. We've talked about that in the past. The Eagles almost won him to succeed. Smallwood has always been pretty effective when he's on the field. His problem is he can't stay on the field. And then you have Jones, as you mentioned, who, to be honest, might have more talent than anybody on this team as a running back, with the possible exception of Ajayi. And he can't hold on to the football, or he hasn't been able to hold on to the football in the past. So I think when you look at Matt Jones, preseason's going to be big. He's going to get a lot of carries. He's going to get a lot of opportunities. And he better hold on to the football. I think if he does, he's got a good chance to make this team.
Yeah. The little interesting thing is, too, okay, you're the Eagles. You're the defending Super Bowl champions. Do you look for the younger player, or do you want the more veteran guy? Are you trying to, when you're trying to add pieces to a team that just won a Super Bowl, are you looking to bring in inexperienced guys, or would you rather go with the more experienced guy? Now, I know you said Jones has trouble holding on to the football, but in any position battle.
Well, that's the difficulty of building a roster, especially a championship roster, because you have to sort of juggle both ends. And the Eagles' standpoint, even more so, because they're so up against it as far from a salary cap standpoint. So, and it's even worse next year as far as you look forward and how much over they're going to be over the cap before they start making moves. In that process, you would want the younger player just because he's cheaper. In the case of Jones, I mean, you have he's a veteran, he's played, and he's still young. So I think, like I said, I think the issue with him is strictly can he hold on to the football? If he was able to hold on to the football in Washington, he'd probably be their starting running back still today as we speak. That's the kind of talent he has. But obviously, if you can't do that as a running back and you keep putting the football on the ground, eventually you're going to get benched. That's what happened in Washington, and then he was eventually released. So it's sort of a reclamation project here.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work, the Eagles can just move on. There's no cap realities to it or anything of that nature. He's sort of here on a prove-it basis, and I think it's a worthwhile gamble because he is a talent. But typically, in a larger scale standpoint, I mean, the Eagles remain a significant Super Bowl contender, and that's why you do go for the veteran players. That's why I do think they want Corey Graham back. That's why I do think they want to bring in a veteran at defensive tackle.
Let me ask you this then. I'm reading MMQB's Albert Beer reporting Eagles Sidney Jones has, quote, turned heads during OTAs. Okay, I don't need him to tell me that. I think you guys have all seen that, right? This guy looks like he can play. You wrote about it. Others have said it. But, obviously nationally now people are saying, hey, this guy Sidney Jones looks like a player. That being said, there's a lot of talent back there, a lot of depth. Would they still, at this stage of the season, and I don't say would they still, they've done it. They did it last year. Would they trade one of those corners? Would Jones's progress force them to say, you know what, we're good enough in this spot, we believe in this kid, and we still have an asset? And if they were to add somebody via trade, would it be either for a player or for a draft choice?
Well, I think they would prefer every situation is different. Obviously, if you're able to get a valuable veteran player, I mean, Darby's a perfect example of that. Last year, that kind of helped the Eagles at a position of need that has all of a sudden turned into a position of strength. But if we look at that again, Darby would be the most obvious guy to trade. And I think there's a clear path to get to that spot, and that's if Sidney Jones looks like what people think he's going to be, and that's a top 15 talent. And if he's that good, and if he projects to be that early in his career, you want him on the field. And his best spot is going to be outside the numbers. It's not going to be in the slot. You don't want to have a guy with that talent. I don't want to use the term waste because that's a very important position. But when you have that talented of a cornerback, it doesn't – what name you want to mention? Patrick Peterson, Xavier Rhodes, Richard Sherman when he was healthy. They're all outside cornerbacks. Those guys don't play in the slot because the best wide receivers in this league are generally outside the numbers. So that's ultimately where you want Sidney. So guy I'm going to write about soon is Devontae Ballsby. Jim Schwartz loves him. Nobody knows that much about him. He was on the practice squad. If he can show that he could be that slot cornerback, and Sidney is all of a sudden on the outside because you need him on the field, and then you have Jalen Mills, well then, yeah, you have the potential to trade a cornerback. But you have to see that sort of happen first and break, and the Eagles would still have depth with Rasul Douglas. And so it is a position that has turned from what was thought to be a weakness at this time last year to an extraordinary strength. And remember, they lost Darryl Worley because of the arrest. Would have been even stronger. But, yeah, those are the positions you tend to trade from, positions of strength.
Yeah.
Hey, John, you brought up Jim Schwartz a moment ago, and we know how entertaining he is in his press conferences, and he calls it like he sees it. Now, he didn't get a head coaching job this offseason, but could you see if they had another good year? Do you see him staying again, or do you see that interest even more profound in him and somebody picking him up and him moving on?
Yeah, I see him moving on. I'm surprised he's still here, to be honest with you. I don't know why he didn't get a head coaching job. I think people default in this league to offensive-minded guys first, normally, not always. There's a lot of defensive-minded coaches, starting with the best of them all, Bill Belichick. But for the most part, it seems like people trend offensively first, and obviously Jim's a defensive guy. And then you have his personality. I mean, he's got a big personality. He sort of takes over a room when he walks in, and some people take that the wrong way. So I think sometimes that's a hurdle for him. I don't know if he can turn it off. It doesn't seem like he can turn it off. And I think sometimes that hurts him. And the fact that obviously he had one chance, so then you have sort of the retread label, even though people kind of forget he took that team to the playoffs and he turned around a really, really bad football team. So I think he should be a head coach in this league. I think he ultimately will be again. And that's part of the problem with success. We've already seen it on the offensive side with Frank and John DeFilippo.
Yeah.
I think that's going to continue. I mean, we saw it with Andy Reid. I mean, look at the Andy Reid tree in this league.
Yeah.
From when he started in Philadelphia. It's astonishing. And when you're that highly thought of, you lose assistant coaches pretty consistently.
John, I know you have a lot of connections and ties to the Vikings. What's the reaction DeFilippo's been getting up there? Positive?
Yeah, I mean, this time of year, everything's positive. Everything's great. Everything's 100. But I think, far past Minnesota, I mean, John was a lot of people thought he was going to be head coach directly from being the quarterback's coach here, and he got an interview. So, I mean, he was sort of on the fast track for being a hot head coaching candidate. And I said from the minute the Vikings hired him, if they play as well as everybody expects them to play, they're going to be a good team again. I think it could be a one-and-done situation. I think he could be a head coach as quickly as 2019.
Get him on Twitter at JF McMullen, his national NFL column at getmoresports.com. Check that out. And, of course, every day right here on the Sports Bash. John, have a great weekend. Hey, by the way, will we get a Friday news dump tonight, or are we going to wait through the weekend?
Well, that's the way to do it. Friday news dump, 6:30. But
you think the NBA asked them to hold off?
They definitely asked them to hold off yesterday on Thursday. I would say they would not do it on the day of a finals game. That's been the NBA sort of mantra. Don't take the focus away from the finals. But I think the bigger issue here, I think it would be done today. If there were no legal issues they have to kind of sift through.
Yeah.
And maybe that makes it last a little bit longer. Otherwise, I would tell you 99% we're getting a Friday news dump. But I do think there's some legal issues they got to work through.
All right, John, take care.
Take care, guys.